Welcome, everyone, to Authors on the Air. I'm Pam Stack, your host. I'm also a book junkie and a cat wrangler. Most of you know that about me. You've heard about my Fab Four. Today, I'm very happy to have a very special guest, Dr. Johnathan Shivers. He is the vet for the Fab Four. Hi, Dr. Shivers.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
I'm thrilled that you're here. So I thought today we would do a little bit of the truth about cats and dogs, since those are your specialties. You don't really deal with exotic animals, but everybody I know has a cat or a dog, and people who don't have a pet are not my friends. So the first thing I want to ask you, though, is there are a lot of myths about animals. For example, if a cat or a dog has mange, you can put motor oil on them to cure it. Now, I happen to think that's the most horrible thing I've ever heard. But one of my four had mange, and I had to dip him in some stinky smelling stuff and keep it on him. Why in the world where did that myth come from? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think basically that was probably an old folk remedy on something they might have used. And you know what? Something like that might kill the mange, but it also might kill your pet. So you might have you might change one problem for a much bigger one. There's medicines and there's a lot better ways to deal with something like that. So we really don't push for something like that'd be so toxic and probably not fun to deal with at the house anyway, without getting it all over yourself or anywhere else. So I don't know, that's an old folk one that kind of I've heard before. Usually out in the country, that's one that I hear from time to time. We usually kind of encourage them to pick some new methods that we have. There's better ways.
There are newer things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's okay. So my favorite thing is everyone says you can tell your cat or dog is okay if you touch their nose and it's cold. Is that true?
I've heard the cold, wet nose story. I see lots of warm, dry noses and they're fine. Now, if they do have a fever, they might be a little bit warmer and you might tell that on their nose. But I can say I never use that as any determining factor when I do an exam. And we go pretty thorough from nose to toes. And that's not really something I usually coordinate into there. Other than maybe correlating to if they're warmer, they have a fever, then their nose might be a little bit warmer. But I don't really look at that as much of as an indicator for me.
That's not a vet condition or a vet symptom you're looking at.
Yeah, every once in a while I get a client coming in and they say, "Oh, my, like you said, the dog's got a warm nose or something like that," and I can't remember ever someone coming in for that and really turning into much more than a
warm nose pet.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, people run hot and cold too, I think sometimes. So
there you go.
Everybody runs a little differently, but
so I'd like to know, what is the average lifespan of a domesticated cat?
So I would say on average, a minimum goal we hope for on average would be around the 16, 18 year mark. 16 is pretty common. We see if you're doing anywhere in the teens in general, I think you're doing pretty well. But, ideally like to see them go into their 20s. And we can see that and many will, and some just naturally live, a little bit, have a shorter lifespan, but generally the 16 to 18 is a good range to say, hey, you're doing something right if you gotten them that far.
And what about for dogs? And I know dogs have a varying range because whether they're a pedigreed or whether they're a mutt, whether they're little, where they're bred down super small. I don't know if dogs are bred up or not. I guess they would be with Labradoodles. But is there an average range for dogs in general?
It really kind of depends. I see a lot of dogs that are a larger breed that will live for a shorter amount of time. So compared to a smaller breed, like say a 10 or 15 pounder, a Chihuahua or a Maltese or a breed on a smaller side, we'll see the smaller guys live for, I don't know, I'd say closer to 15 years, not as long as the cats, but 14, 15 years on average. And then for a big dog, like say a Labrador, like, you may mention 60, 70, 80 pounds. I would say the average is closer to about 12 years. And then we have some larger breed dogs, some Mastiffs, and breeds in the 100+ pound range. And, some of those Great Danes we'll be expecting an average of around 8 years
Wow.
potential. And some still go longer. We're just talking about averages here. So that's not any end all be all by any means.
What is the breed of dog that people can have if they're allergic to dogs?
Well, it seems like some of the hypoallergenic breeds, there's some hairless breeds. It seems like with dogs, I have a lot of clients who will focus on poodles, or now they're looking at labradoodles or something along those lines. The poodles have more of a human type hair, so they shed much less, and they seem to have a lot less dander and a lot less problems for people.
And cats?
There are some hairless cats out there, some Abyssinians, Sphinx, those type of breeds, and they will be fairly hairless, and they are unique. They have a lot of personality though, and we have seen a lot of those lately also, and I think that's another reason. Some people just really like the look, but also less fur, less dander, and they do a little bit better with that at home.
They dress them up too, don't they?
Oh,
I can't imagine trying to dress up one of mine. You know, all four of my cats, and not anyone, particularly Godiva, would ever be happy about that.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let's back up a little bit. I'm sorry, say it again.
I would say some cats don't mind very much, but others won't have it.
You know, these four know they own me, so that's not. There's not a. I can't even put a bell on a collar with them. So I want to go back to the very beginning. You grew up in Miami, where I did, and you were always a pet lover. Tell me about growing up and your love of animals.
Well, like you said, I grew up in South Florida, so I would say I must have been about 5 years old in kindergarten, and I just, kids always pick randomly some profession or some job they see that they just think, oh, that's great, and changes every month or two. And I basically just decided I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was little. And growing up, we had there was a dentist actually, and one of his family members was a receptionist, and she got into rehab things like squirrels and birds and things like that. At one point, I think I was 8 or 9, they were rehabbing 4 squirrels, and they let us take over it with my family. So I was like one of the primary caregivers there, and we raised them up until they were strong enough to be released. And I mean, for a kid, it was just fantastic and fulfilling. And, I had a pet dog that I love very much, and we had other pets throughout our younger years, and it just kept building on that. And one day I started working in high school with a veterinarian, and kind of the rest was history. I still loved it and everything about it. So here I am now.
You went to University of Florida School of Veterinary Medicine, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was there for all of my training for graduate and undergraduate.
What kind of internships or externships did you do?
Well, what we would do is when we were in clinics for our 4 years of veterinary training, they would allow us to do externships in a few week blocks. And I did some throughout the state. I did some emergency medicine blocks in Tampa, where you would go for a couple weeks and work exclusively in the evenings for all the emergency calls. And you would see anything that would bring pets in. We could do general practice externships as well, where we would just go to a veterinary practice, and work with the doctors and see all the cases that they saw and work them up accordingly. And then the mainstay for all of the students was to do clinical rotations at the hospital, where you would work in everything from large animal to small animal to surgery to cardiology. We have oncology, and also, with the large animal, you could do the same thing all over again, medical, surgery, and you get to see all the specialists. We got to take care of bald eagles, tigers, all sorts of neat things.
But you've confined your practice to cats and dogs.
Yep, absolutely. I've enjoyed practicing on a wide variety of animals, but here in sunny Fort Myers, that is kind of the mainstay with what we have. And
it is indeed.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to do some of the to be focused on a small practice here, small animal practice, and then also do something like horses. It requires a lot more house calls, which would take me away from a lot of my appointments in-house.
Would you tell us, please, about your 2 locations in Fort Myers? I see you at both places when I'm with my cats, but primarily I see you at Companion Animal Center or Pet Center. Would you tell us why did you choose those 2? Because they're pretty far apart. And tell me a little bit about your practice.
Yeah, well, we started out at Indian Creek Pet Hospital, and that is in South Fort Myers, right on the way to Fort Myers Beach and to Sanibel. So that's where I basically moved here and kind of took over from a good friend's parents, actually. So I kind of knew the entire family, and it just was a great fit, and got started there. And then while we were working there, we kind of saw that actually we had some clients driving from further away from other areas, and basically happened to find another practice that just opened where the previous veterinarian, his family life took him outside of Fort Myers. So we went from South Fort Myers to a more central location, which is around or off Winkler and 6 Mile, which is a little bit more central. And it actually kind of worked out where we had some clients that had moved towards that area and found us there, and we're ecstatic to have kind of access with a little bit less traffic, especially as we get into our high season where all the snowbirds come down and everything gets a little bit more hectic in the area.
Well, I've been to both offices and your staff is marvelous in both of them. So anybody who's interested in going really should go. Dr. Shivers and his staff are very kind and compassionate, all of them. So I think you'd enjoy it. Dr. Shivers, will you please discuss just briefly some best practices for house cats?
All right.
And should cats go outside? That's really a big bothering thing to me because I like to take care of all the outies outside, and I've seen too many of them harmed by predators, whether they're dogs or other animals, or because they get caught in a car and they get acid dripped on them, run over, things like that. So best practices for house cats.
So I would say we generally do recommend for them to be indoor. You kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of the concerns. Outside they can get into tussles with wildlife, raccoons, other animals, other dogs that may try to find them. Cars, they may not always understand what's coming at them at night, and that's not a great way to lose a pet, and you may never even find out. You never really know. So we do know there are studies about significantly shortening the lifespan of an animal that's outdoors versus an indoor pet. And we see it in the day-to-day when we have an indoor-outdoor one that comes in for some sort of wound from fighting with other cats. It may be from a dog or, a hit by a car or something like that. So we think usually, they do pretty well inside, and, unless you have a screened inland eye or somewhere where they can stretch their legs a little bit like that, but we usually recommend them pretty much keep them on the property in the house where it's a little bit safer, and a little bit less for you to worry about.
Now, domesticated cats are very different from cats that live outside, like our Florida panther and everything. Mm-hmm. Because of just years of domesticating them, centuries of domesticating cats, are they tolerant more of indoor temperatures, or do cats not mind being out in the heat or in the very, very cold?
I think I'd be a little bit more worried about being in the very cold up north. Down here, I don't think it ever gets too terrible.
No.
I gotta admit, I know plenty of cats that love hanging out in the garage. Really? I know some people who leave their garage door, they'll leave a little cat door to the garage, so they're still in the house, and they will go out there and hang out.
So bizarre.
It's crazy. You just got to be careful about when you back out your car, which hopefully those cats realize when you're coming out there and they hear the door shut and the engine turn on, to be careful. But, out in the wild, we always occasionally will hear about kittens, and when it's cold out, that some kittens will go into the wheel well if the tires are somewhere warm. And that's always a concern, because if you hear them and they don't realize what's going on, that can be a recipe for disaster. But actually they will enjoy some warm weather. I don't know what it is or what they like about the garage or what, but that's only some. I think they can handle it, but I don't think they need it, as far as anything along those lines.
Okay. So when you go to feed your cat, I've always been told that you never buy pet food in a people store. Does that hold true?
I think it just depends what they offer. There's so many cat foods out there. You just need to look at some of the labels. They should have something called the AFCO statement or the AFCO label saying it meets the minimum requirements of nutrition. just to make sure that you've got a good diet. And that's something that really, depending on your cat and how big or small they are, weight wise, if they're overweight or if they're right ideal, that's something that I kind of recommend you kind of look at on a case by case basis with your vet, and you can talk to them about whatever diet you happen to be on already. And is it a good diet for your pet? And I think they'll be able to tell by, well, we're kind of overweight. It might be a great diet, but we could cut it back a little bit, or, hey, we got a gorgeous coat and everything's looking good. Or, are we vomiting? Do we have lots of hairballs? There's a lot of things we can tie into that. And I mean, there's a couple okay diets. There's obviously varying degrees of quality, but you can still get a decent quality, I think, if you just kind of discuss it with your veterinarian, and they can give you options that you can get at most places, whether it be your vet or a pet store, or there's a couple that you can still get, I would say, at a human pet or a human food store. But I think you got to be very careful and very selective, because they do have a lot of the lower tier, kind of like the junk foods,
right?
Well, that you may not do you as much of a service, and that's something you kind of address on a case by case, and can usually talk to your vet about which brands they recommend.
Very good. Now, as far as vaccinating cats, what's the rule of thumb, and how often should they be visiting you?
Well, for us, we do protocol where we have core vaccines, which we consider rabies, and then there's a combo vaccine we sometimes call a feline, almost like a distemper vaccine, which includes panleukopenia, rhinotracheitis, and calici, which are some of the common things that we will find in our environment, and we will occasionally see outbreaks kind of pop up. And we recommend those for our indoor pets because they do sometimes sneak out and they do sometimes get into things. And especially rabies is really more of a human health standpoint safety issue, where if heaven forbid, we always see these random, anything that can go wrong will, where we'll be playing with a toy. It turns out to be a dying bat, which happens to be dying because it had rabies, or something that got into the keys of a house or something. But those are the core vaccines we really recommend. And then there is a vaccine for leukemia, and we recommend that for anybody that either goes outside or, basically goes outside is the main thing. Or we also like to recommend that for young cats as kittens to get just initially, because that's probably when they're most susceptible to a lot of infectious diseases, and you really don't know what kind of cat you're going to have necessarily. Like, you think you do, but then there will be some of these escape artists that just, you go out to get groceries and leave the door open a crack going in between the car and the kitchen. They will sneak out and not come back till tomorrow and get in a tussle, because that's something you were going to worry about when they're coming in contact with some cats from the outside. So
let's talk about dogs now. What are some of the best practices for dogs? And we'll start again with, how should dogs be out in the yard all the time?
I think they can be, but if they are, they're going to need access to water, access to shade. Ideally, I like them indoors also, but they do enjoy being outside. In Florida, we do get some pretty intense heat, especially in the summertime. And it can be pretty brutal for a good part of the day. So you definitely need a shady spot, hopefully where there's some air ventilation and flow, which outside we should have some anyway, and a water bowl that I would keep somewhere again in the shade, so it doesn't kind of get too cooked.
And water, yeah.
And I would say it's always good to have, if they have access into just a cooler shaded area in the house. Some people have porch access, so they can come into the screen porch. I know my dog stays out too long. She gets pretty stinky pretty quick. So no.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. Some people tell me they bathe their cats. Now, my only cat that likes water is Godiva. The other ones, if I tried to, she used to jump in my jacuzzi all the time. She just loves water. She'll come in the shower and everything. How often do you actually have to bathe a cat if they're not dirty? And how often should you be bathing a dog?
I would say for a dog, I usually bathe them when they stink, but some people can do it once a week, and I think that's great. For cats, they do maintain themselves pretty well. And if they need a bath, sometimes some of them just like laying in dirt, and then you don't want that in your house laying all over your couch or wherever else. And that might be an indication that it's time for them to get a bath. if they were out on a porch or a patio lanai like we talked about. But for the most part, they should be able to clean themselves. And if they're getting really dirty or matted, that might be an indication they need to get checked out, because they may just not feel well. They may not be grooming themselves like they should be because they feel off or something's not right with them. And you may want to get them checked out and see. And again, it's just kind of, if you see them, if you're a white, fluffy snowflake or Q-tip or a cotton ball white cat come in and they're all of a sudden gray or black, I think they can groom
It's
themselves.
a good indicator.
Yeah, it might be time to get them cleaned up.
Let's talk about dog food.
Mm-hmm.
Again, can you buy good dog food in a people store, or should you be buying dog food in a dog food store, a pet supply store? Because I think their needs are nutritionally very different, aren't they?
Yeah, they are slightly different. In a pinch, you can feed cat food to a dog, but you should never have a cat trying to live off dog food, because they need certain amino acids like taurine that there's just not enough in dog food. So you can't get away with that with cats. But dogs will eat anything. The only problem is I feel like the cat food is a lot of times higher calorie, where they gain a little bit more weight, and the dogs will get a little bit chubby if you put them on just cat food or something. But in a pinch, you can get away with it and you won't do any harm.
Okay.
I still think, some of the best foods are going to be at pet stores or at your veterinarian's office, but there are a few diets that you might find that will work. And for a short term, I often use it like we described. Sometimes there are a few diets that are more based on marketing, and it might be, okay, not the best, but it kind of like a junk food where, you can go out to get pizza every now and again, but should you eat it every night? Not necessarily.
Right.
In a pinch, if the stores are closed and you have to get something there, that's all right. But you're going to get, generally your better quality is going to be either at your vet or your pet store.
Okay. What about vaccines and vitamins for dogs?
Well, I've always been told, we went to a couple of nutrition classes, even in undergrad. Sometimes when you're taking vitamins, it's almost like you're just buying expensive pee, because a lot of that, if you're on a proper diet, you should be getting a balanced meal anyway. But sometimes we do have deficiencies in certain ways because we have a certain metabolic disorder or something like that. And it certainly can't hurt for them to have it and utilize everything they can to the best of their ability, especially if they do have a maldigestion or something, where possibly supplementing a little bit extra will help level that out. So a majority of healthy animals may not need it. And again, if we do an exam and see that there's something going on, we may offer that. Sometimes we will do puppy and kitten supplements just to help them with their growth and make sure they have everything they need. And it may just be one or two things within a multivitamin that they actually need, and the rest are just in there. And they, like I said, you're just buying expensive pee and they'll just pee them on out. But
there you go.
It's not a bad idea. It's not going to hurt anything. And sometimes you may think, hey, what do you have to lose?
Okay. What are the no-nos with cats and dogs? What do you never want to do? For example, is it okay to give cats ice cream and whipped cream and milk?
Okay, so a lot of cats will ask you for it and will be very happy if you give it to them. But technically, cats and dogs are actually lactose intolerant with cow's milk. So especially if they get a lot, they could get a bellyache, they could have vomiting, they could get pretty upset stomach. A lot of people always know, cats love cream, and they do like it, but it doesn't mean they should have it. Even if you get a kitten that you rescue or you find, and it's usually we don't adopt them out before they're 8 weeks old.
Right.
But if you find one outside, a stray or something along those lines, and they need milk, you shouldn't be using cow's milk. They have KMR, a kitten milk replacer, and we use that. Oh, excuse me. And they have a puppy milk replacer also. A lot of times we will sneak and use, if we in a pinch, we can use kitten milk replacer for puppies, and that's okay. But we don't usually go to cow's milk for them, because it will upset their stomach and cause other issues. So yeah, I don't really recommend that. Whenever I hear about that, I don't really recommend that. In small amounts, everything in moderation, small amount here and there is probably not the end of the world. But I think there's other treats you can offer and maybe not get yourself in any trouble or worry about it either.
Okay. Anything there you should absolutely not do for a cat or a dog?
Well, that's kind of broad. That's kind of...
Well, what is it you see that you're always saying, I don't think that's healthy for your pet?
I would say, so for cats, I would just worry. If you're on a balanced cat food, you should be in good shape there. but it's not necessarily what you feed, but it's how much you feed. We're seeing a lot of animals that are getting on the heavier side, and if they're obese, for cats, to see tons of cats that turn and transition to diabetes, and that's something that can kill them if they're not medicated and regulated once they get that. And if we, with the right diet, we can get some to revert back to a normal cat, which is ideal. So you're not having to give them insulin every day, which is an injection. But I would say, I mean, diet is something that's easy to control that you guys can do at home and hopefully prevent something like that. For dogs, diabetes is a concern too, but I think the dogs that get more obese, they are more prone to arthritis. And there was a study, gosh, it must have been 10 years ago, retrospective study where they split up litters of Labrador puppies, and they kept some on the heavier side and some on the skinnier side of normal, and not even grossly obese, but basically the ones they kept on the skinnier side of normal lived on average like an extra 14 months.
Wow.
And, so I think that's something with diet that can be a huge, it's just so easy to affect that and have a good outcome for different reasons for the two breeds, or species, excuse me. So I think that's something, but I mean, gosh, you could talk forever about all those. That's such a broad, there's so many things that could potentially, you could discuss there, but I think it would be a good one that you can focus on and have a good effect on.
There you go. If I want to find another vet, and I'm not going to, but if I don't live near you and I want to find a good vet, what do I look for? Besides talking to my friends, I'm new in town and I need to find a veterinarian. Is there some special qualification I should be looking at, or some affiliation that I should be looking at that clues me off? Gives me a tip.
There is an AHA certification. So it's American Animal Hospital Association. So that is one where basically, I think in general, most vets are excellent. They're well trained. They're highly trained. They're smart individuals, and you really have to find someone that just fits with you and your personality. Probably, I think that's important. So that's where maybe a friend who has someone they like, you may identify with them because it's someone that gets along with their personality that you agree with. But there is the AHA is something you can look for, and that's just they have certain standards of their own that they hold accountable, an additional higher standard. But even ones without the AHA certification and that are not members of the association can be great vets. And I know a ton on both sides of that spectrum, and they can all do great things in great medicine. I think the best thing you can do is ask friends for places that they've been happy. I think word of mouth is the most legitimate. I've seen lots of things on reviews that I can read through, and I know that it's not exactly accurate for places that I've dealt with, and I think that's too easy to manipulate from that standard. I think talking to people and then calling the hospital you're interested in and seeing how they handle things when they talk to you on the phone. I think a lot of hospitals are more than happy to potentially give a tour. Things might be a little bit different right now, dealing with COVID and things along those lines, but just take a look and go somewhere you're comfortable with. I mean, for a lot of people, this is like their child. They call them their fur babies and everything else. Right. A lot. So I think they should be able to answer some questions if you have any from the receptionist standpoint. And I don't think it's unreasonable to schedule an initial exam and have them kind of do an exam and get a feel for them, and then decide, is that something you want to do for the long term, or, maybe make that a one-time visit and then you decide to go elsewhere. I mean, you have to feel comfortable. For, like I said, for many of these people, this is a family member. So I think those are some things. I do think talking to someone you actually know, I think that's valuable. Yes. Some of the stuff you see online, I feel like that's usually someone, more often than not, is more upset about something than happy.
Right. Than happy. Right.
Yeah.
I want to remind everyone I'm speaking to Dr. Johnathan Shivers. Dr. Shivers is the veterinarian for my Fab Four. He also has seen a lot of my friends' pets, and they're very happy with him. Dr. Shivers, will you please tell us the websites for your two centers here in Fort Myers, Florida?
There's IndianCreekVet.com, and Companion Pet Care is CompanionPCC.com.
Dr. Shivers, thank you so much for being with us. Before I let you go, is there a book that you would recommend for people who want to adopt a pet and don't really know what kind they want to adopt, or should they talk to a vet? Who do you go to find out about adopting for your family?
That is a good question. I don't know of any specific books that really give you a good idea or guide for something along those lines. I haven't had a lot of those scenarios where they're trying to figure out on what would be a good pet for me. That would be something you could call a veterinarian that you know in your area and speak to even our support staff. And it really kind of just depends on what you're looking for. And then we can kind of give you an idea on, I want a companion that likes to go for runs and jogs and high energy, or I want to train them, or
right.
Well, I just want a companion that I can take on a plane with me and go all over the U.S. traveling. There's a lot of different options, but yeah, you can actually call, and I think most veterinarians are actually really good resources for things like that, where the staff really care also, not just the veterinarian, but the support staff that really helps so much make a hospital what it is. They can kind of give a lot of great advice and kind of help with that a lot. Because if we don't have a pet to examine, sometimes it's a little bit tougher for us to kind of get to know you, but I feel like our support staff can really, they can be an ambassador for our clinics and kind of help with those type of questions.
Yeah, your staff is wonderful in both places. I have to, give 5 stars on both. I'm always very happy to go and happy to refer people. This is my guest, Dr. Johnathan Shivers of Fort Myers, Florida. He is a veterinarian extraordinaire, and I found him from a Facebook friend of mine whose husband is a veterinary surgeon up in Sarasota. And when I had a problem with one of my cats, he says, oh, here's a great guy for you to go and see. So there's a referral from another veterinarian, a vet surgeon, though. He has a surgical hospital, and he sees all breeds of animals there. Dr. Shivers, thank you so much for being with me today. We really appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that you're sitting in the room that has the kitty cats on the wall.
Yeah, I thought you might like that.
I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.